This is my favorite portion of the presentation, the prophetic significance of the 2020 election. It's a critical time in our world right now. And the prophetic significance of this election is huge. And God has placed an incompetent president at the helm of the most powerful country at the most crucial time. That sovereign plan is going to bring bad guys to where they need to be in the preparation of the tribulation period. There are right now significant geopolitical movements that are rapidly intersecting. I talk to people all the time about this stuff. Oh, Tim, why do you think the Lord's coming back soon? Oh, what? Here's why. Pay attention. If you didn't hear anything, get this next section. I love that. Because the next 4 years have the potential to be a perfect storm of highly critical, international, prophetic events shaping the world for the coming of the Lord. Not the least of which is that Biden could easily drop America's safeguards to protect Israel's interests. Right now, we're watching the realignment and shakeup of the whole Middle East caused by Trump's Abraham Accords. Are you with me tonight? Trump's Abraham Accords peace deal realigned the Middle East. It's probably the greatest prophetic development happening. The Arab nations need Israel's military and nuclear weapons to position themselves against Iran because they're scared to death. All of a sudden, there's a group of allies that Israel have, a contingency of Arab nations. President Trump, it was Jared Kushner last week said there was 4 or 5 ready to sign within the next 2 weeks as Trump walked out. There were 4 or 5 more to sign, and he named who they were. The paradigm shift caused by the Abraham Accords is bringing dozens of prophecies into play. And then there's the idea of Israel building. How many of you know Israel needs to build their temple in order for the end times to start out in the tribulation period, right? Now, I got a great story. Every 7 years, Israel chooses a new president, not a prime minister, a president. And it's been Reuben Rivlin for the last 7 years. His term's coming up in the summer of 2021. 2021, excuse me. Now, we've talked about the temple gaining traction over the last few years. Remember at the elections, we talked about all of a sudden they were running for office. Pro-temple politicians were forming parties, making let's build the temple their plank and getting voted into the Knesset. In fact, Netanyahu was embracing them and they were becoming part of the Likud coalition. But this summer, Yehuda Glick is running for the presidency of Israel. You say, who is Yehuda Glick? I'm glad you asked. Yehuda Glick is a red-headed dynamo. He's been notorious fighting for Israel's rights on the Temple Mount. He is the foremost fighter for the Temple Mount and the building of the temple in the entire state of Israel, and he's running for the presidency. As we speak, he's got about a 50% chance. Could you imagine if the leadership of Israel decided we're going to build the temple? They would all of a sudden have a coalition of Arabs that would help them negotiate for their security and for their rights to be able to build the temple on the Temple Mount without touching the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Because, listen, in Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2, there's a prophecy. Jesus tells John, who's writing the book of Revelation, he says, go measure the temple. And he says, but leave off the outer court because you're going to share it with the heathen. In other words, Revelation 11, 1 and 2 call for a sharing relationship between Israel and the Muslims on the Temple Mount in Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2. Well, we're there. You'd have to have the Muslims there, first of all, for that to come to pass. They're there, and the president of Israel saying, I think we ought to be there too. God is providentially doing things. The next one there, Saudi Arabia now comes out, and the top cleric says, Muhammad never went to Jerusalem. Now, y'all remember this story, how Muhammad supposedly rode his white donkey, Barak. And you can't make this stuff up. It's too good to be true. He boarded Barak in Mecca and took the express to the Temple Mount. Muhammad went up the steps, saw Allah, told him to pray 50 times a day. Coming back down, he bumped into Moses and Jesus and said, that's too many times, go back up. He goes back up, comes down again, he says, 20 times, get back up there. I got it down to 5, we'll take it. Saudi Arabia, the head of the Islamic religion, says he never went to Jerusalem. What? There's a shift with even the head of the Islamic religion, Saudi Arabia, wanting to clear the path for Jerusalem, wanting to clear the path for Israel to build a temple on the Temple Mount, coming from the mouth of the top cleric of Saudi Arabia. And one more. Pakistan said the same thing. Their top cleric says, Israel belongs to the Jews. Are you kidding? Are we in La La Land here? This is one of prophecy's biggest mysteries, is it not? How's Israel going to build the temple on the Temple Mount with the dome there and the Al-Aqsa there and everybody hates Israel? Can you see how fast we're getting to the point where it's all possible?